An old woman, all bent over and dressed in black, a kerchief on her head, bowed silently and deeply to Rogojin. He quickly asked her something and, not waiting for an answer, led the prince further through the rooms. Again there were dark rooms, of some extraordinary, cold cleanness, coldly and severely furnished with old furniture in clean white covers. Without announcing himself, Rogojin led the prince into a small room that looked like a drawing room, divided by a gleaming mahogany partition with doors at either end, behind which there was probably a bedroom. In the corner of the drawing room, near the stove, in an armchair, sat a little old woman, who did not really look so very old, even had a quite healthy, pleasant, and round face, but was already completely gray-haired and, one could tell at first sight, had fallen into complete senility. She was wearing a black woolen dress, a big black kerchief around her neck, and a clean white cap with black ribbons. Her feet rested on a footstool. Next to her was another clean little old woman, a bit older, also in mourning and also in a white cap, apparently some companion, who was silently knitting a stocking. The two looked as if they were always silent. The first old woman, seeing Rogojin and the prince, smiled at them and inclined her head affectionately several times as a sign of pleasure. "Mamma," said Rogojin, kissing her hand, "this is my great friend, Prince Lev Nikolaevich Mishkin. He and I have exchanged crosses. He was like a brother to me in Moscow for a time, and did a lot for me." "Bless him, Mamma, as you would your own son." "Wait, old girl, like this, let me put your hand the right way." But before Perfion had time to do anything, the old woman raised her right hand, put 3 fingers together, and piously crossed the prince 3 times. Then once more she nodded her head gently and tenderly. "Well, let's go, Lev Nikolaevich," said Perfion, "I only brought you for that." When they came back out to the stairs, he added, "See, she doesn't understand anything people say, and she didn't understand any of my words, yet she blessed you. That means she wanted to herself. Well, goodbye, it's time for us both." and he opened his door. "But let me at least embrace you as we part, you strange man!" cried the prince, looking at him with tender reproach and trying to embrace him. But Perfion no sooner raised his arms than he lowered them again at once. He could not resolve to do it, he turned away so as not to look at the prince. He did not want to embrace him. "Never fear. Maybe I did take your cross, but I won't kill you for your watch," he muttered unintelligibly, suddenly laughing somehow strangely. But suddenly his whole face was transformed, he turned terribly pale, his lips quivered, his eyes lit up. He raised his arms, embraced the prince tightly, and said breathlessly, "Take her, then, if it's fate. She's yours. I give her up to you. Remember Rogojin." And, leaving the prince, not even looking at him, he hastily went to his rooms and slammed the door behind him. It was late, almost 2:30, and the prince did not find Epanchin at home. Having left his card, he decided to go to the Scales Hotel and ask there for Kolya. If he was not there, he would leave him a note. At the Scales he was told that Nikolai Ardalionovich had left in the morning, sir, but on his way out had alerted them that, if someone should ask for him, they should tell him that he might be back at 3 o'clock, sir. And if he was not there by 3:30, it would mean that he had taken the train to Pavlovsk, to Mrs. Epanchin's dacha, sir, and would be having dinner there. The prince sat down to wait and meanwhile ordered dinner for himself. Kolya did not come back either by 3:30 or even by 4 o'clock. The prince went out and walked mechanically wherever his eyes took him. At the beginning of summer in Petersburg there occasionally occur lovely days, bright, hot, still. As if on purpose, this day was one of those rare days. For some time the prince strolled about aimlessly. He was little acquainted with the city. He stopped occasionally at street corners in front of some houses, on the squares, on the bridges. Once he stopped at a pastry shop to rest. Occasionally he would start peering at passers-by with great curiosity, but most often he did not notice either the passers-by or precisely where he was going. He was tormentingly tense and uneasy, and at the same time felt an extraordinary need for solitude. He wanted to be alone and to give himself over to all this suffering tension completely passively, without looking for the least way out. He was loath to resolve the questions that overflowed his soul and heart. What, then, am I to blame for it all? He murmured to himself, almost unaware of his words. By 6 o'clock he found himself on the platform of the Tsarskoye Selo railway. Solitude quickly became unbearable to him, a new impulse suddenly seized his heart, and for a moment a bright light lit up the darkness in which his soul languished. He took a ticket for Pavlovsk and was in an impatient hurry to leave, but something was certainly pursuing him, and this was a reality and not a fantasy, as he had perhaps been inclined to think. He was about to get on the train when he suddenly flung the just purchased ticket to the floor and left the station again, confused and pensive. A short time later, in the street, it was as if he suddenly remembered, suddenly realized, something very strange, something that had long been bothering him. He was suddenly forced to catch himself consciously doing something that had been going on for a long time, but which he had not noticed till that minute, several hours ago, even in the scales, and perhaps even before the scales. He had begun now and then suddenly searching for something around him. And he would forget it, even for a long time, half an hour, and then suddenly turn again uneasily and search for something. But he had only just noted to himself this morbid and till then quite unconscious movement, which had come over him so long ago, when there suddenly flashed before him another recollection that interested him extremely. He recalled that at the moment when he noticed that he kept searching around for something, he was standing on the sidewalk outside a shop window and looking with great curiosity at the goods displayed in the window. He now wanted to make absolutely sure, had he really been standing in front of that shop window just now, perhaps only 5 minutes ago, had he not imagined it or confused something? Did that shop and those goods really exist? For indeed he felt himself in an especially morbid mood that day, almost as he had felt formerly at the onset of the fits of his former illness.